Aisha Sehgal. On the show today, we will tell you about the negotiation for a ceasefire in Gaza, which have resumed in Doha between Egypt, Qatar, the US, Israel and Hamas. However, Israeli Prime Minister says that it is not clear whether a hostage deal would see the light of the day. He has further asserted on how Israel is pushing ahead with plans for a ground invasion in Rafah.
Also on the show today, South Korea has raised its public health alert to severe for the first time after thousands of doctors went on strike to protest against government recruitment plans. How chaotic is the situation in South Korea, and will this have any political ramifications given the assembly elections in April? We will be tracking that closely right here on World DNA. Let's get you started with the headlines first.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows to push into Rafah, says any ceasefire deal would only delay Rafah operation.
The Israeli army presents the war cabinet with a plan for evacuating civilians from the areas of fighting in the Gaza Strip. The announcement comes as Israel threatens a full-scale invasion of Rafah, Gaza's southernmost city.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky says 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers are killed in the war with Russia in a rare official statement on military losses sustained during the two-year war.
Hundreds of Nigerians take to the streets against the soaring cost of living, with inflation nearing 30% and its currency hitting an all-time low. Nigeria is facing one of its worst economic crises in years.
India's Allahabad High Court will deliver a verdict on plea against prayers at Gyan Vapi cellar. Earlier, the Varanasi district judge allowed Hindu devotees to offer prayers inside Vyas Ka Tehkana area in the Gyan Vapi mosque complex.
The latest household consumer expenditure survey indicates that India's poverty level has fallen below 5% and people are becoming more prosperous both in the rural and urban areas.
Liverpool captain Virgil van Dijk headed in the winner 2 minutes from the end of extra time to hand the Reds a record-extending 10th League Cup title with a 1-0 victory over Chelsea.
Now, the Israeli Prime Minister, his office, has said that Monday the military has put forth a plan for evacuating civilians in the Gaza Strip along with an operational plan.
Yes, Shivana, the announcement comes as Israel threatens a full-scale invasion of Rafah, which is Gaza's southernmost city and has been so far untouched by the ground troops.
Now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said on Sunday that the military operation into Gaza's Rafah would put Israel within weeks of total victory over Hamas. Negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza have resumed in Doha, state-linked Egyptian media reported, but Netanyahu said that any deal would not prevent the Rafah offensive.
Now, speaking to CBS, the Israeli Prime Minister said, and I'm quoting him here, "If we have a ceasefire deal, it will be delayed somewhat, but it will happen." He added, "If we don't have a deal, we'll do it anyway. It has to be done because total victory is our goal. And total victory is within reach, not months away, weeks away, once we begin the operation."
An Israeli team was in Paris on Friday to discuss a deal on a fresh ceasefire and the release of hostages in exchange for Palestinian prisoners held by Israel. Now, the talks then restarted in Doha with the Hamas representatives. Netanyahu said, "We're all working on it." I'm, of course, quoting him here. "We want it, I want it, because we want to liberate the remaining hostages." He added, again, I'm going to quote him, "I can't tell you if we'll have it, but if Hamas goes down from its delusional claims and brings them down to earth, we'll have the progress that we all want."
Now, during the Hamas attack on Israel on October 7th, Palestinian militants took some 250 hostages, 130 of whom remain in Gaza, including 31 presumed dead. As with the previous truce in November that saw over 100 hostages and 240 Palestinian prisoners freed, Qatar, Egypt and US have been spearheading efforts to secure a new deal.
International pressure for a ceasefire has mounted in recent weeks. According to Gaza officials, the death toll from Israel's military offensive on the Palestinian territory is nearing 30,000, mostly women and children. Now, Israel has vowed to destroy Hamas, which rules Gaza, in response to its October attack that resulted in the deaths of over 1,100 people in Israel, mostly civilians.
Now, Shivan, one of the most visible spillovers of the Israel-Hamas war is the current situation in the Red Sea.
Now, Houthis, they are the ones most operational in the Red Sea region as of now. Since several months now, Houthis have been targeting ships to stand against Israel's oppression in Gaza. But this has provoked the United States to carry out daily strikes. Our next report gets you the latest in the region.
The Houthis have targeted an American oil tanker in the Gulf of Aden. What the rebel group sees as solidarity with Palestinians in Gaza, the West sees as illegal attacks. This comes as the United States and British forces carried out another round of strikes on Saturday. A joint statement confirmed that 18 Houthi targets across 8 locations in Yemen were hit. This is the 4th time that a combined operation was carried out. The strikes also have support from the wider coalition, from countries like Australia, Bahrain, Canada, Denmark, the Netherlands and New Zealand. The latest strike was part of a series of Western attacks on Houthis. In fact, the US has carried out nearly daily strikes. But they have so far failed to deter the Houthis. According to global maritime trackers, the rebel group has attacked at least 45 vessels in the region. The attacks have upset global trade and raised shipping rates. The vital Suez Canal shortcut has been disrupted. It accounts for about 12% of global maritime traffic.
The Yemeni armed forces, along with all the great Yemeni people, persist in upholding their religious, moral and humanitarian duties towards the Palestinian people. And their military operations will not stop unless the aggression stops and the siege on the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip is lifted.
Over in Yemen, the situation is complicated. The Houthis control most of Yemen's west, and this is one of the most populated parts of the country. The people in this part agree with the Houthi cause.
The strikes will not affect us. We are now fighting for Gaza. Our fight is for Gaza and Palestine. We will not be deterred by the strikes of the Jews and the Americans, no matter what. We are used to war. We have been in war for 9 years.
Your strikes will not intimidate or scare us. We will keep on supporting Gaza with all the power we have.
The more you move away from the west and towards the center, the politics changes. Yemen's Presidential Council is asking for foreign force against the Houthis. They wish to launch a ground operation that would back US and UK airstrikes. But the question is the West ready for a third proxy war? Bureau Report, WION World is One.
From one war front to another, of course, we're talking about the Russia-Ukraine war. Volodymyr Zelensky stated that Russia is preparing a new offensive against Ukraine starting in late May or summer. But Kiev has a clear battlefield plan of its own now.
Speaking a day after the second anniversary of Russia's invasion, the Ukrainian president said that it was extremely important for Kiev and its Western allies to remain united. He further asserted that Ukraine's victory depends on continued Western support.
Now, Zelensky told reporters that we will prepare for their assault. Their assault that began on October 8th has not brought any results. I believe we, for our part, will prepare our plan and follow it. Of course, this is a direct quote. Now, he said that some 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers had been killed since February 2022, giving the first official toll in more than a year. The Russian Foreign Ministry rejected the Ukraine figure as untrue. The Ukrainian president said that troop rotations would be critically important for the war effort and emphasized that Kiev needed to better prepare its reserve forces.
2 years into the war, Moscow's troops bear down along the sprawling 960-kilometer front line in Ukraine's east and south. From shortages of artillery shells and the need for longer-range missiles to a lack of fresh troops, problems are piling up for Ukraine. Zelensky said that he was confident that the US Congress would approve a major new batch of military and financial assistance, and that Ukraine needed that decision within a month. He further added that the European Union had only supplied 30% of the 1 million ammunition shells that were promised.
Russia secured its biggest battlefield gains since May 2023 this month as it captured the town of Avdiivka, which Ukrainian troops retreated from to avoid being surrounded. Now, President Vladimir Putin said on Tuesday that Russian troops would push further into Ukraine to build on their success in Avdiivka. On Sunday, Russian Defense Ministry said that its forces had taken more advantageous positions near the town.
Well, on Ukraine's battlefield intentions, Zelensky said that Kiev had a clear plan to counter Russian forces, but that he would not disclose details that could compromise it. Kiev's troops conducted a much-wanted counteroffensive last year, but were unable to pierce Russia's defensive lines. Zelensky said replacing his Popular Armed Forces chief in a dramatic military shakeup this month was a part of his military strategy that would remain under wraps. The Ukrainian leader said earlier that Kiev's plans for last year's counteroffensive had ended up on a desk in Kremlin before the operation had even begun, but did not say exactly how. He further said that Kiev hopes to hold a summit in Switzerland this spring to discuss its vision for peace with its allies, adding that the peace blueprint would later be presented to Russia.
After much delay, after a lot of waiting, Sweden is finally set to join NATO. Budapest is preparing to approve Stockholm's NATO bid in a vote on Monday.
And that is days after it signed a deal to buy 4 fighter jets from Sweden. Hungary's parliament is due to ratify Sweden's bid to join NATO in a vote at its first session today.
Now, Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban met with Swedish Prime Minister Kristersson and stated that he had managed to rebuild trust, considering that the Swedish Prime Minister's party has a majority in Parliament. It could have approved the Nordic countries' membership at any given time since its application submission in 2022. However, the prolonged delay in approval has soured Budapest's relations with the United States and raised concerns among allies within NATO. Striving to join NATO, Sweden says its submarines will give the military alliance a strategic edge in the Baltic Sea. Moreover, as required under NATO rules, Sweden is aiming to spend 2% of its GDP on defense by 2026 to increase its military capacity across land, sea and air.
Well, military non-alignment had been a point of pride for the people in Sweden. A clear majority of people were against NATO membership before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It was only when the Social Democrats Party changed its mind on NATO membership that pollsters saw a big shift in public opinion on record. Moving on, anger continues to grow among citizens of Nigeria over economic distress and hardships.
People are staging protests against the government and blaming President Bola Tinubu for the crisis. Now, in the southwestern city of Ibadan, hundreds of Nigerians hit the streets and demonstrated against the soaring cost of living and the related crisis. Now, this comes after a massive agitation rocked northern Nigeria earlier this month.
The demonstrators also carried placards reading, and I'm quoting here, "End the crisis in Nigeria." And they also demand stable electricity supply and an end to food scarcity that has hit the West African nation.
We are hungry. This hunger is too much, and we cannot stay. We cannot do prostitute. I'm a student. There is no food. My gas has finished 3 days ago. It's now 1:05. We don't have money. We can't call house. This hunger is too much. And it's not like this before. Look at us now. There is nothing. We are starving. Tinubu should please do something. This is not his promise. He promised to do better. Look at us now.
The pain is too much. They should tell him if he cannot solve our issues, he should vacate the office. It is enough. The suffering is enough. There is too much hunger. We can't pay our children's school fees. We can't pay our rent. Please help us and tell him that it's too difficult to eat. His tenure is too hard. If he cannot make things easier, he should vacate the office of the president.
After assuming the president's office last year, Bola Ahmed Tinubu ended fuel subsidy and currency controls, a move that led to a surge in petrol prices and a spike in living costs. The Nigerian naira has been sliding sharply against the US dollar.
President Tinubu has called for patience to allow his reforms to take effect, claiming foreign investments in the future, but his government's measures have hit the general public in the hardest possible. According to the National Bureau of Statistics, Nigeria's inflation reached almost 30% in January. Poorer sections of citizens in Nigeria have had to give up consuming essentials such as milk and eggs, increasing the cost of living, which sparked widespread protests in cities including Suleja, Minna and Kano.
And for more on this, our correspondent Louisa Olineani sends us this report from Lagos. Take a listen.
With widespread hunger ravishing millions of Nigerians and the workers' purchasing power significantly eroded due to inflation and a decline in the naira value, citizens now resort to protest. Nigerians are grappling with hardship that emerged from economic policies and reforms put in place by President Bola Tinubu since he assumed office on May 29, 2023. Meanwhile, government at various levels are devising means to pacify the people by introducing initiatives to cushion the effect of the hardship, as experts warn of imminent uprising, even as organized labor gear up for nationwide mega protest on 27th and 28th of February. From Lagos, Nigeria, Louisa Olani, WION World is One.
The newly elected leader of the Maldivian Democratic Party and former Foreign Minister Abdullah Shahid has publicly refuted claims made by President Mohammad Muizzu regarding the presence of thousands of Indian military personnel in the Maldives.
Right, posting on his social media platform X, Abdullah Shahid said, 100 days in, it's clear President Muizzu's claims of thousands of Indian military personnel. They were just another in a string of lies.
He added that the current administration's inability to provide specific numbers stems from the fact that there are no armed foreign soldiers stationed in the country. Shahid's comment comes in the wake of accusations directed by the MDP by the current government, alleging that the previous administration had permitted Indian soldiers to be based in the Maldives, thereby compromising national sovereignty. Shahid criticized the current administration for perpetuating falsehoods to garner support.
He further warned that constructing foreign policy on unfounded claims could erode trust and negatively impact the Maldives' relations with other nations, including India. Well, notably, the removal of Indian troops in the Maldives was the main campaign of Muizzu's party. Currently, there are around 70 Indian troops, along with Dornier 228 maritime patrol aircraft and 2 Dhruv helicopters stationed in the Maldives. On the second day of assuming office, Muizzu officially requested the Indian government to withdraw its military personnel from Maldives.
In December last year, Muizzu claimed that after talks with the Indian government, an agreement was reached to withdraw Indian military personnel.
A female police officer in Pakistan has been recommended for the prestigious Quaid-e-Azam Police Medal, which is the highest gallantry award for law enforcement in Pakistan.
Now, of course, this happened after she braved a mob to rescue another woman. The woman in Pakistan's Lahore was mobbed for wearing attire with prints in Arabic. People alleged allegedly mistook it as verses from the Quran, and the female officer came to her rescue by handling the angry crowd and escorting the woman, covering her in a burqa. Punjab Police IG Dr. Usman Anwar praised the ASP for saving the woman, saying that the female police officer put her life in danger to rescue another woman from a violent crowd. The woman was spotted wearing the dress while she was dining at a restaurant in Lahore. Soon after, people assembled and hurled abuses and threats. Some of the crowd surrounded the woman, leaving her frozen in fear, while some bystanders attempted to protect her from lynching by the mob.
ASP Saida Sherbano Naqvi said that they studied the dress and found that it did not have any Islamic verse. It was later revealed that the dress is from Saudi Arabian label Shalik Riyadh, which was launched during Ramadan in 2022. Well, the victim woman said that she wore the dress without knowing the content printed on it. She later apologized for wearing the dress. A Muslim cleric who was present when the woman issued her apology added that she was promised not to wear the shirt again. After the visuals went viral, some Pakistani netizens too condemned the incident. And with that, it's now time for a short break.
Of course, this is World DNA. Don't go anywhere. When we come back, on the other side, we bring you updates from South Korea, where doctors continued their protests against the government's plan to increase medical school admissions.
Also on the other side of the show, the world is sitting on debt time bomb, which has crossed the 300 trillion mark. Some countries are at a greater risk than others. We'll get you all the full report and more on the other side. This is World DNA. Do stay tuned.
WION, India's global voice, the channel that brings you the biggest stories from across the world through India's lens. Now available in more than 190 countries worldwide. Because we believe that the world is one. Watch us in Africa, Europe, USA and Canada, South America, Asia Pacific, Middle East and North African regions. Also available on these digital platforms across the world. WION. World is one. We are one, you and I. Burning in the sun. Rising in the rain. One in celebration. One in pain. One in a tragedy. One for our rights. One in search of hope. One in our fights. One beyond borders. One beyond our race.
This could be one
in the face of adversity. We are one, you and I, and it's our right to know how and why. WION, you are more connected than you know.
I'm Vikram Chandra, and join me on WION with 2 weekly shows that will keep you informed. This World, a show that wraps the world's biggest global stories and brings you up close with the biggest newsmakers.
This World is coming to you from London.
From in front of the White House in Washington, D.C.
From one of the most magical sites that I think I have ever been at.
It's completely feasible for India to become one of the world leaders in AI within the next decade or so.
The search for life in the universe is one of the greatest quests of all time.
And a show that aims to bring the India story to the world. We help you understand global developments from an Indian perspective.
We are developing the road infrastructure. In the end of 24, it will be equivalent to the road infrastructure of USA.
We have put up airports
which were obliterated from the civil aviation map almost 50 years ago.
जो भी मेरे competitors हैं उनके साथ हमारा सभी का आपस में एक अच्छा रिलेशन भी है हम एक दूसरे को हमेशा पुश करते हैं अंदर खेलते टाइम भी
I'm Vikram Chandra and this is WION World is One, taking India's voice to the world.
Ready to dive into your daily dose of news?
Bringing you what's trending in the West and all that's setting trends in the East.
And all of this served up with a side of insightful banter.
We don't just bring you the latest stories.
We bring you your talking points for the day.
And while you do that, from the busy streets of New York, I will provide you with deeper insights on the developments through the course of the day in the U.S.
From New York, we get you to the sandy shores of Durban, where I'll bring you all the glitz, glam, and happenings from the world of showbiz.
Welcome to the Eras Tour.
And I will be here at the WION headquarters, getting you all the action from the universe of sport. All that you need to know about your favorite teams and players, right here.
The show that keeps you ahead of the global curve. A conversation you'd want to be a part of.
A place where news becomes an engaging exchange.
We bring you stories that impact your present.
This is World DNA.
Join the conversation.
Economic turmoil and global unrest have cast a shadow over President Joe Biden's approval ratings.
The rockets are continuing to be fired by Hamas in Gaza, although at a slower rate than previously.
So, right now, we are with the volunteers from the Aleppo municipality. They are still trying to go to the rescue for the people they can find out.
India has emerged as a major diplomatic force at the world stage.
The rising cost of living in Nigeria continues to impact citizens from all walks of life.
The citizens of Gujarat witnessed a mega roadshow here in the city of Ahmedabad.
China is South Africa's largest trading partner for 134 years straight.
A domestic aircraft carrying 72 people on board crashed in Pokhara city in central Nepal.
165 injured have been moved, 61 people are confirmed dead, and rescue operations continue around me.
After receiving an entire season's rainfall in a span of 48 hours, Chennai city has literally been brought to its knees.
For WION, World is One.
Welcome back. Thanks very much for staying with us. You're watching World DNA with me, Raisha and Shivan. And here on the show, we're just talking about how negotiations for a ceasefire in Gaza have resumed in Doha. But the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has clearly said that it is not clear whether a hostage deal would see the light of the day.
From one war front to the other, we've been tracking these stories closely. Of course, regarding the Russia-Ukraine war, Volodymyr Zelensky has now stated that Russia is preparing for another offensive on Ukraine in the summer, and also gave a toll for the first time in over a year, stating that 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers have died. Of course, that's a claim that Russia refutes. We are tracking those stories closely. For now, let's get you started with the headlines at this hour. This is World DNA.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu vows to push into Rafah, says any ceasefire deal would only delay Rafah operation.
President Volodymyr Zelensky says 31,000 Ukrainian soldiers are killed in the war with Russia in a rare official statement on military losses sustained during the two-year war.
Hundreds of Nigerians take to the streets against the rising cost of living, with inflation nearing 30% and its currency hitting an all-time low. Nigeria is facing one of its worst economic crises in years.
हम लोग इधर टीएसपी के तौर पे सर्व कर रहे हैं, किसी को कोई शिकायत नहीं आई.
A Pakistani police officer saves a woman from a mob over misunderstood attire. Punjab police recommends her name for the prestigious Quaid-e-Azam Police Medal, the highest gallantry award for law enforcement in Pakistan.
Maldivian opposition leader and former foreign minister Abdullah Shahid debunks President Moisu's claims regarding the presence of thousands of Indian military personnel in Maldives.
India's Allahabad High Court will deliver its verdict on a plea against prayers at Gyanvapi's cellar. Earlier, the Varanasi district judge allowed Hindu devotees to offer prayers inside Vyas Ka Tehkana area in the Gyanvapi mosque.
The latest household consumer expenditure survey indicates that India's poverty level has fallen below 5% and people are becoming more prosperous both in the rural and urban areas.
Liverpool captain Virgil van Dijk headed in the winner 2 minutes from the end of extra time to hand the Reds a record extending 10th League Cup title with a 1-0 victory over Chelsea.
Well, South Korean doctors have continued their demonstrations against the government's plan to increase medical school admissions.
Now, at the centre of the dispute is a recent government announcement that universities would admit 2,000 more medical students from the next academic year. Hundreds of senior doctors held a rally near the presidential office in Seoul. The government says it aims to add up to 10,000 doctors by 2035 to address what it calls a shortage of doctors in the country's fast-aging population.
But doctors say that higher medical school admissions will only lower the overall medical education level in South Korea, and it will not solve the resource imbalance. Now, before the rally, the doctors gathered at a meeting held by the Korean Medical Association. The association has requested the government to cancel the plan.
At this point, our goal is to make the government realize it is a wrong policy and urge them to start the dialogue from the beginning. I think it is the collective goal of 140,000 doctors. I believe that myself, the emergency committee and 140,000 doctors will voluntarily work together until that goal is achieved.
Through the week, collective walkouts of nearly 10,000 doctors have caused cancellations of surgeries and disrupted other hospital operations. It has raised concerns that more patients may miss the time for treatment as the stalemate continues. The medical center and the Samsung Medical Center said they have cut the number of surgeries by over 40%. A few patients said they had been asked to leave the hospital as soon as possible. The South Korean government has said that it will continue implementing the policy and take prompt judicial action against the doctors' resignation. It has warned the striking doctors to return to work immediately or face legal action. In response, the association has vowed continued protests.
Well, they argue that South Korea's population will continue shrinking due to the low birth rate, so there will be no shortage of doctors. But the decline in birth rate is alarming. South Korea has the lowest fertility rate in the world. In 2020, the number of deaths had already exceeded the number of births. It's also important to mention here that South Korea's doctor-to-patient ratio is among the lowest in the world, particularly in pediatrics and emergency departments and in rural areas as well.
The protests have thereby failed to generate public support, with a survey suggesting about 75% of South Koreans support the government's push to train more doctors. All right, for more on this, we are now being joined by our Voice of America correspondent, Bill Gallo, who's live from Seoul. Bill, welcome to World DNA. Wanted to get your opinion on this. If you can give us a better understanding of what's happening on ground. And, of course, this is the first time in South Korea's history that public health alert has been raised to severe. Can you give us a better sense of what's happening there?
Well, many hospitals are definitely overcrowded. I don't want to minimize this. However, it's important to note that these are trainee doctors. Senior doctors are still on the job. They're still working. I think that these senior doctors have a lot of solidarity with their striking junior colleagues. But, most emergency medical care is still being done. There are long waits, especially at certain hospitals where there are more trainees, sort of training hospitals. And one way to look at this is sort of what my wife experienced this weekend when she needed to go to the doctor for a minor kind of throat and cough issue. She was told, to see a doctor, she needed to wait 2 or 3 hours. So for minor things like that, yes, it's very much of a nuisance. At certain hospitals, it may even be more serious than that. But most, or if not all, senior doctors are still on the job, and they're still doing, the emergency, very vital procedures at this point.
Right, will you speak of how you've narrated that anecdote that happened with your wife and how the situation there in South Korea is now affecting the people. My question to you is that why should there be a protest at government plans to raise the number of trainee medics? Where exactly is the disagreement?
Right, I mean, it is sort of an interesting question. There is agreement on one issue, I would say. Pretty much everyone agrees there is a shortage of doctors. South Korea, of course, has very famously good health care, famously cheap health care. But as is often the case in developed countries where there is good health care, people tend to overuse that. And so when you go to the hospital, even in normal times here, it can be very crowded. And you do get the sense that there is a shortage of personnel. Now, what doctors say is they're not getting paid enough and they have poor working conditions. So what the government has decided to do to fix this is to basically add more workers into the pipeline. The idea there, the doctors fear, is that this will essentially not only not create better conditions and better pay, it will actually lead to worse conditions and worse pay, according to the doctors. Doctors think, the solution here is to make structural changes, to raise the pay, to make the conditions better, have not such long working hours, and that this would sort of naturally attract more doctors into the system. However, the public is very supportive, I must say, of the government's moves at this point, because most people experience this not as a doctor, but as a patient.
Bill, now, the assembly elections are scheduled in April. They're right around the corner. Do you feel the current situation is going to have some political ramifications here as well?
Well, it's interesting. I don't know that the strike will impact the elections as much as the elections will likely impact the strike and the labor situation. There is a sense here that perhaps the government knows that it has the public support for its plan to increase the number of trainee doctors. I think the doctors also know that as well. I think they think that if they can hold out for another month until these elections, or so, another month or so until these elections, perhaps after the election, both sides, or perhaps especially the government, will be more likely to give in. So I think we're in it for another few weeks here, at least until this election happens, and then we'll have to see. But it's certainly not going to get better, I don't think, in another day or two.
Right, that was Bill Gallo, our Voice of America correspondent, joining us live from Seoul. Thank you so much for sharing all your insights.
Thank you.
On to the world of business now. The world is sitting on debt time bomb, which has crossed the $300 trillion mark.
Now, of course, we have been bringing you reports on this. However, some countries are at a greater risk than others. Our next report tells you more. Take a look.
Debt, the Achilles heel of governments, has reached $313 trillion worldwide. The worst hit are the developing countries, where deficits are widening, currencies are weakening, prices are rising, and growth is slowing. 3 countries in particular could remain highly indebted: Argentina, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. Argentina is the most indebted country in the world by a huge margin. It already has an active IMF relief package, even as its national debt has crossed $400 billion. Inflation there has crossed 250%, while 6 out of 10 people live below the poverty line. Libertarian President Javier Milei vows major reforms to cut the debt burden and resurrect the economy. However, a shock therapy is likely to jolt the economy even further. The incoming government in Pakistan has its task cut out: negotiate an IMF deal to bail out the economy. The country's total debt is about $290 billion. A large part of it is external debt taken by the government. Pakistan's fragile economy is beset with rising inflation, dwindling forex reserves, and widening fiscal deficit. But an economic recovery will be tougher for the country, as a large part of its budget will go into interest payments. In 2022, the island nation of Sri Lanka defaulted for the first time since its independence in 1948. Colombo's huge external debt, constituting over 70% of the GDP, drained the country of its forex reserves. That meant that the country had little money to buy essentials from abroad, triggering a massive inflation. All this took a toll on the economy, which contracted by 3.8% in 2023. Recently, the government announced its intention to restructure the debt. Analysts argue that a huge debt burden is like a quicksand. Debt restructuring could help economies to function just by paying the interest on the total debt. But that will only prolong but not resolve the crisis. The world awaits a long-term sustainable solution for the debt crisis. Bureau Report, WION The World is One.
Next up, let's take a look at all the developments from the world of technology, starting with Google. The co-founder, Sergey Brin, is facing a lawsuit following a fatal plane crash that claimed the lives of 2 pilots in March 2023. The legal action was filed on February 13th in a court of California that alleges a maintenance error which caused the tragic incident. Now, the complaint specifically states that a mechanic installed an extra fuel system without proper procedures, leading to the crash. Furthermore, it's alleged that Brin's team deliberately obstructed the investigation process by slowing down efforts to retrieve evidence. The widow of one of the pilots, Lance McLean, has sued Brin and other parties involved in the plane's ownership and maintenance. McLean seeks compensation for her husband's death and wishes to highlight negligence in the handling of the aftermath of the plane crash.
While deep fakes of celebrities Oprah Winfrey, Lawson and Piers Morgan have been used in an online ad. These ads gave the false impression that they endorsed a US influencer's controversial self-help course. Now, these celebrities have criticized the AI deepfake adverts that claim that it can change lives. Deepfake technology was used to mimic these stars that manipulated their voices and images to falsely endorse the manifestation course. YouTube and Meta have taken down the adverts, and experts confirm the use of deepfakes, raising concerns about their increasingly convincing nature.
Social media platform X, which was formerly known as Twitter, is expanding its audio and video calling features to all users and not just those with premium subscriptions. Initially launched for iOS users last year, the feature was limited to premium subscribers. However, the recent update ensures that all users can now make and receive calls through the app. Earlier this year, Elon Musk, CEO of X, announced that the company would roll out audio-video calling to everyone once it was confident in its stability.
According to the official X support page, all accounts can make and receive calls, although both the parties must have previously been in contact through direct messaging. This move represents X's ongoing effort to become a comprehensive platform as envisioned by Musk to cater to various communication needs of its users. And now to the world of sports. Liverpool manager Jurgen Klopp's farewell tour is up and running. Captain Virgil van Dijk has made sure that Anfield's beloved German leaves the club with at least one silverware this season.
Now, his header late in